Hello to another Prime podcast. We're back this week. It's our 10th episode, and as we start to kind of fade into the fall after the summer, a lot of tech news has been happening. IFA 2012 started out last week, and I have a little bit of that kind of news to wrap up with a bunch of new phones like the Galaxy Note 2 from Samsung and the HTC Desire X, those kind of phones, a bunch of new Sony phones. We also have the Galaxy camera, which was also announced last week. We also have a bunch of good news from this week. I reviewed the Nexus 7, that's one of the things we'll talk about. Also talk about Apple's iPhone 5 event, which will happen very shortly. And talk about Motorola's Droid RAZR, new Droid RAZR lineup, as well as a Kindle Fire. I can briefly go over that too. But there's a ton of events going on right now, like Nokia had an event yesterday too, as of the recording, but tech news, all these companies are essentially trying to get all their technology out there before the end of this year, before the holidays. And to do that, they're going to launch it early fall, mid-fall, just to get out there for Christmas, all those other holidays, and probably even before Black Friday, all those other holidays. So we're going to see a lot of technology coming out very soon. We know the summer was kind of just boring, kind of a few new things, not a whole lot of news. That's definitely going to change as this holiday season approaches. So let's go ahead and get started with something that isn't exactly brand new news, but it is something that I did do. I reviewed the Google Asus Nexus 7. I've had the tablet for quite a while now. I've had it for a month or 2 months by now. And I really I've gotten used to it. I kind of meant to publish a review a little while ago. Then I decided maybe I should publish just one review each month and just kind of simplify things that way. Since I reviewed the Galaxy S3 last month, I'll be doing this tablet rather. The Nexus 7 this month. And this review is kind of in-depth. It goes over a lot of content. I'm just going to briefly go over it. Start out with the specifications. This tablet, Asus made it very cheap, yet very powerful. That means they put a Tegra 3 processor inside, which is very fast. 1 gig of RAM, pretty standard stuff there. Not much storage at 8 or 16 gigabytes. The display is a 7-inch 1280 by 800 IPS display. Generally speaking, it's a decent display. It works, but it just isn't very vibrant. The colors are kind of dull, kind of washed out. I just don't like the display on the Nexus 7 a whole lot. When it comes to the cameras, only front-facing cameras, which is 1.2 megapixels, nothing very impressive there, but they had to save money there too. Input-output, there is a pretty standard headphone jack and USB connector. There's not much more than that. There isn't any micro SD card slot, removable battery, or anything like that, like many other devices have. Next up is performance, and this Nexus 7 performs very, very well. I have a list of different benchmarking tools I used: Antutu, BrowserMark, Geobenchmark, Geekbench, Limpad, Quadrant, SunSpider, Alamo. If you want to see any of those results, you can kind of check them out. Let's list two of my favorites. Quadrant's one of my favorites. It scored 4,407. And my other favorite is Geekbench, and it scored 1,486 there. So pretty good scores. When it comes to real-world performance, that's where things really matter. Thanks to Android 4.1 Jelly Bean, this tablet just feels very, very, very smooth. Animations are all running at 60 frames per second, meaning you just don't see any stuttering or any lag like we've seen with previous Android devices. So, for example, when you click the multitasking button, especially with the original Honeycomb tablets, I remember just clicking that button, waiting more than a second, maybe like 5 seconds, for all the app list to start up. And once it starts loading up, you can kind of scroll through them and swipe away apps. But it was just so laggy, and it's still kind of laggy with Ice Cream Sandwich. But now with Jelly Bean on this Nexus 7, it's just incredibly smooth, or Google calls buttery smooth because it's Project Butter that really speeds up that. So that's really good. One thing I haven't noticed is that touch responsiveness isn't very good on the tablet, especially in certain applications like Chrome. Just kind of touch something, you wait a little while, it just feels kind of laggy and not very good. Chances there's just some software issue right there that should be easily fixed. Since Chrome on other devices like the Galaxy Nexus is just fine, so I think it's a software bug. When it comes to battery life, thanks to the Tegra 3 processor, we're looking at some impressive battery life. Some devices I review, I go through the day and it dies over the end of the day. Not the case with the Nexus 7. Like right now, it's been running from 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning to now it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I still have 90% of my battery left. So essentially, you can probably get through a week with the Nexus 7 if you use it just kind of mildly. I kind of use like a phone. I have it with me on my desk next to me. I can either all I have is just pick it up, read my email, put it back to sleep. That's kind of what I use the tablet for right now. Or search something on Google very quickly, and I don't use it constantly. And if I do, it'll still have good battery life. It'll still go, I think, 9 hours. That's what Google's saying, 9 hours of HD video playback, which is pretty impressive right there. When it comes to software, Jelly Bean brings a lot of new features like Google Now, which is kind of like Siri or S voice. But instead of just you asking information, Google Now predicts what you want to know. So essentially, if you, let's say, search for a sports team, it'll automatically put up information on that sports team, like if they win or they lose. Or you drove to a restaurant. It'll say, do you want to check into that restaurant? And it'll essentially show you how to navigate home, which is going to be very useful. Google also updated their notifications. Now you can drop down from the notifications, and it essentially shows more detail. So normally you just show like the headline of an email. You can expand it. You can see multiple emails if you have multiple emails, or if you're just one, it'll show you like the first paragraph of the email, which is very useful. And a lot of applications take advantage of that. Home screens have also been updated so that when you add a widget or an icon, they'll all automatically rearrange to fit everything on that home screen. It's kind of useful. And again, that performance, things are just very buttery smooth. When it comes to the aesthetics of the tablet, Asus did use cheaper materials like plastic, but the tablet does feel very solid. I like the back cover, which is made of a nice solid rubber, which makes it easy to grip, and it also makes it smudge and scratch resistant when you grip something like the iPad, which is kind of hard to grip, and it scratches and smudges very easily, which is kind of bad. And other Android tablets kind of had some sort of shiny back, and that just kind of smudged like crazy, scratched like crazy, but it did feel good in the hand, so the Nexus 7 is kind of a good mix between those. When it comes to portability, this tablet's very portable. Think of it as like a pocket-sized tablet. Some might not be able to put it in their pocket, but me, I can fit a 7-inch tablet in my pocket, no problems. It's kind of useful there. You can carry it around with you whenever you want. And it's not too big, it's not too small. It's bigger than a phone, but a little bit smaller than a larger tablet. So in conclusion, I'm very pleased with the tablet. I gave it a score of 8.3 out of 10, simply because overall it's 9, but the specifications could be better. There could be a rear-facing camera, that kind of stuff. And the display was kind of just subpar to what I'm used to with all these Super AMOLED displays, or all those kind of displays I've been using recently on other devices. So it's kind of disappointing there. But overall, good tablet. You can read the full review. There is a link in the description below to check that out. Next up, our first sponsor is Media Temple. I've been using them for over a year now, and they're a very good web hosting company. They offer many web hosting services starting at $20 a month. You can check them out there. They also offer domain names. They're in a promotion or domain names for $4 a month, or a year rather. That promotion ended, and domain names are just $12 a US for normal price. Still a good, very good deal. So you can check them out. They have domain names, web hosting. They can even transfer your website over from another web hosting company that might not be so great to Media Temple, which should be a much better web hosting company. So you can check out Media Temple. And let's go ahead and move on to the next article, which is the highly anticipated iPhone 5. That's because Apple actually sent out invitations to an event. We don't know if it's going to be an iPhone 5 event exactly, but the invitation is very clever. It's almost done. It's almost here, and there's a 12, and that 12 reflects, and you can see the number 5. So it's obvious that we're going to see something that's going to be something 5, and most likely it's going to be the iPhone 5. And that just makes sense. It's been rumored, but it also means that we probably won't be seeing the new iPad mini, which could launch later this year, and we most likely won't see new iPods, because I think Apple's going to focus on their new iPhone and iOS 5, or iOS 6 rather. I think they're going to focus on that, and not the iPad or iPods, which they might have another event for later this year. So I'm going to go over the rumors, like the final rumors, the predictions of what's going to happen next week at Apple's event, which we should cover. Hold on, I forgot the date. It's the 12th. So yeah, we will cover it. It'll be in the next podcast if you want to see that. So we will be covering the next podcast. But overall, the iPhone 5 should have a similar design that's almost identical to the current iPhone 4S. It'll keep the same front and back are just kind of flat. The home button still have the rounded corners, everything that we're used to. But on the other hand, it'll be a little bit bigger than the previous iPhone. It'll be a little bit taller, and I don't think it's going to be a whole lot wider, but it's going to be a little bit bigger. It'll also have a new docking connector, which is a little bit smaller than the current one, and it should bring compatibility with new technologies like USB 3 and Thunderbolt, which would be very, very useful when transferring songs, media, and backing up your iPod, that kind of stuff. It should also feature 4G LTE connectivity, and after spending months on Verizon's 4G LTE network and now AT&T's 4G LTE network is heading to my state, not early Lincoln, it was headed to Omaha at launch day. That's one of the things that was announced today, which I'm not really talking about in depth. But a bunch of new cities got AT&T coverage, and I expect Sprint's going to eventually get LTE coverage in Nebraska too, and as AT&T's going to get coverage in Lincoln too, most likely. But Verizon's 4G LTE network is in most places now, and if you're looking for the new iPhone, you're kind of like, this 3G is kind of slow. If you get the Verizon model with LTE, you're going to be impressed on how fast the device is going to be, especially when browsing the web and that kind of stuff. But the iPhone 5, the next one, should support 4G LTE and Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint, just like the new iPad 4G LTE, which is kind of nice. And it shouldn't hurt battery life too much, since basically these devices now, like the Galaxy S3 for example, it offers really great battery life while still offering LTE. LTE chips have been very power efficient now, so shouldn't be an issue there. It also should have more RAM, probably around 1 GB, which should improve multitasking and generally make the phone faster. We should also see this phone arrive with iOS 6, which will be the software that it runs, and it'll have a few minimal updates like something called Passbook, which manages tickets, an improved phone app, FaceTime over 3G, and a new non-Google Maps application, and quite a few more minor features and applications. So that's what you can expect when it comes to the iPhone 5. The event will be held on September 12th. We'll be covering on ZL Studios, not live, but we will be blogging about it after it all happens, and we should figure out on that. We'll also cover it in the podcast next week. Next up is Motorola, since they held an event September 5th, and they had quite a few new smartphones that they unveiled. The phones include the Droid RAZR M, the Droid RAZR HD, and the Droid RAZR Maxx HD. Let's go and start out with their more budget-oriented phone called the Droid RAZR M. And essentially the Droid RAZR M is just like the Droid RAZR from last year, but with a few minor updates. In other words, Motorola has actually just essentially taken the Droid RAZR, same design, same similar specifications, and made it a little bit more of a decent budget smartphone. It'll launch with iTunes Sandwich, and we'll get Jelly Bean before the end of this year. They'll run on Verizon's 4G LTE network at $100 on a contract on September 13th. They'll have a 4.3-inch Super AMOLED display, a QHD resolution, 1.5 GHz dual-core processor, 1 GB of RAM, and 8 GB of storage. Motorola will also be selling the Droid RAZR M Developer Edition for $550, and it'll be off contract, and it'll ship it with an unlocked bootloader, allowing you to very easily install your own Jelly Bean ROMs or any other ROMs you want to get on this phone without having to manually update or unlock the bootloader, which will be kind of useful. And they'll arrive on September 13th, just like the normal RAZR M. Additionally, some sources are reporting that Motorola plans to use the base of the Droid RAZR M from the design to make their own first Intel-powered smartphone, and essentially they take, actually, back at CES 2012 in January, Motorola announced that they would release an Intel-powered phone by the end of this year, and essentially that 1.5 GHz dual-core processor will be made either a Snapdragon chip or an Intel Medfield Atom chip, and the Intel version most likely to be announced later, most likely on September 18th, and it should have a different name, so we can stay tuned for that. Next up is the Motorola Droid RAZR HD, which is more of their mid-range smartphone. It will essentially be a Droid RAZR M with a larger 4.7-inch HD Super AMOLED display, which is same display, kind of, but at a high resolution of 1280 by 720. That basically means the pixels are they're more condensed, higher PPI. Things just look a lot sharper. And the screen's also a little bit bigger, meaning you can just see things a little bit easier. It'll also have a larger 2500 mAh battery in order to power that larger display through the day. The Droid RAZR HD will begin selling later this year for the holidays, and it'll be sold on Verizon Wireless with the Android 4.0 ice cream sandwich. It'll get Jelly Bean for the end of this year, and again, just like them, it'll be Developer Edition, which will be sold at an unknown price. It will have that same sort of unlocked bootloader idea where you can install your own ROMs. When it comes to the specs, it'll have a 4.7-inch HD Super AMOLED display, 180 by 720p resolution, 1.5 GHz dual-core processor, 1 GB of RAM, and 16 gigs of storage. At the top of Motorola's new smartphone lineup is the Motorola Droid RAZR Maxx HD. Instead of releasing the flagship phone and then a few months later a new flagship phone, they're going to launch both of these phones at the same time. I'm referencing the Droid RAZR and the Droid RAZR Maxx. They're basically the same sort of idea. The Droid RAZR HD, which is a phone, the Maxx HD has a larger 3300 mAh battery. That means it'll be able to go longer without having need to charge. It will have the same specs, so generally the same sort of phone, same sort of developer edition idea. It'll start with ice cream sandwiches like the Rumble version, and it'll get Jelly Bean before the end of this year, just like as expected. But Motorola, they focused their event on smartphones, but they did bring up a few interesting topics. One of those was they're really planning to really bring Jelly Bean into the phones. This is most likely because Google recently purchased Motorola, and Google is essentially trying to make Motorola phones so they'll be pure and as up-to-date as possible. But according to Motorola, most Motorola phones, released since 2011, will be getting Jelly Bean before the end of this year. And if your phone doesn't get Jelly Bean, then Motorola will give you a $100 credit towards any new Motorola device if looking to upgrade. I personally think this is a very interesting idea. If your phone doesn't get updated, you'll want to upgrade, so Motorola's just kind of aiding your upgrade. But of course, you have to stick with the Motorola phone, which for some might not be a good idea. So it's interesting there, and let's go on to move on to the next article, which is just from last week, and that's IFA 2012, and all the Android and Windows phones that were announced at that event. So let's go ahead and get started with HTC. They had one phone that they announced. It's called the Desire X, and it's essentially just like the whole one lineup from HTC, to the same great design and software, but it's at a much lower cost. It matches the design of the HTC One Series smartphone, and to keep the cost down, they used HTC's lower-end hardware. It'll launch later this year in Europe and Asia. We don't have any information on the release date or pricing, or exact release date and pricing, or if it'll arrive in the United States. It'll feature 1 GHz dual-core Snapdragon 4 processor, 768 megs of RAM, 4 gigs of storage, 4-inch Super LCD display at a WVGA resolution, and ice cream sandwiches with Sense 4.0. Samsung has actually two phones. One is the Antiv S, one is the Galaxy Note 2. The Antiv S will be Samsung's first Windows Phone 8 device. It will have a similar design to the Galaxy S2, both similar hardware to the Galaxy S3. We don't have any information on the pricing or release date, but chances are we'll see it arrive in most countries for the holidays at probably around $200 on a 2-year contract. It'll feature 1.5 GHz dual-core processor, 1 GB of RAM, 16 or 32 gigs of storage, a 4.8-inch HD Super AMOLED display, which is at 720p resolution, if you didn't already know, and it'll run Windows Phone 8. The other phone is the Galaxy Note 2, the successor of the Galaxy Note. It keeps the same 5.5-inch screen size, but kind of just upgrades the phone to be more like the Galaxy S3. Including the design. The design is very similar to the Galaxy S3. You can actually see the design in the image which is on this video. It has a 1.6 GHz Exynos 4 quad-core processor, 2 gigs of RAM, 16, 32, or 64 gigs of storage, a 5.5-inch HD Super AMOLED display, a 1280 by 720 resolution, and Jelly Bean with TouchWiz. The Note 2 will arrive before the end of this year throughout most of the world, including the United States. The United States version will most likely swap out the Exynos 4 quad processor for Snapdragon S4 processor, which will support 4G LTE. It will arrive probably a little bit. It'll sell probably a little bit more than the Galaxy S3, maybe around $250, $300 on a contract. So a pretty good phone here, and I really like it. I look forward to most likely reviewing it in the future. Sony announced 3 new smartphones. One of those is the Xperia T, the Xperia V, and the other is the Xperia J. Their flagship phone is the T, and it has a 1.5 GHz dual-core processor, 1 GB of RAM, 16 GB of storage, a 4.6-inch reality display at 720p resolution, and it runs Ice Cream Sandwich. It will arrive worldwide in the coming weeks. The Xperia V is very similar to the Xperia T, and it has a lot of the same things like 13 megapixel camera, same processor at 1.5 GHz, same amount of RAM at 1 GB, but it has less storage at only 8 GB, a smaller screen, only 4.3 inches, and it's essentially going to be the more mid-range phone. It will arrive worldwide during the 4th quarter of this year. And next up is the Xperia J. That's going to be their more budget-oriented phone with 1 GHz processor, 512 megs of RAM, 4 GB of storage, 4-inch display at a 54 by 48 resolution, and Ice Cream Sandwich. Next up is ZTE and their Grand XIN. It's going to be their very first Intel-powered smartphone. It'll arrive in Europe in the next month, and it'll have 1.6 GHz Intel Atom processor, 1 GB of RAM, 16 GB of storage, 4.3-inch display, and at a QHD resolution, and it'll run Android 4.1 Sandwich. Our second sponsor is Amazon, since they just announced the Kindle Fire HD today. We'll be talking about the Kindle Fire HD a little bit more next week, but you can go ahead and pre-order from Amazon. It's selling for $199, just like the original Kindle Fire. And a slightly updated version of the original Kindle Fire is selling for $159, so if you're interested in that, you check that out. But the Fire HD is really what you want to look for. It's essentially the Kindle Fire, but with a high-resolution display, a front-facing camera, faster processor, improved audio. It's overall just a much more up-to-date and better Kindle. The original Kindle isn't very good right now, but the Kindle Fire HD looks to be something that can really compete with the existing Nexus 7. And to add to that, Amazon is also selling the Kindle Fire HD 8.9, which is a 8.9 version, 8.9-inch version of Kindle Fire. And they're also saying that 8.9-inch version has a 4G LTE option too. Or the 8.9 also has a 4G LTE option, meaning you can run it on a carrier too if you want to do that. But the Fire HD is really the thing you're looking at right now. It's a pretty good device from what I've heard so far. And it looks to be something that can really compete with the Nexus 7, so you can check that out. You can pre-order from Amazon, and it's due to arrive on September 14th if you're interested in non-release date. But let's go ahead and move on to our last article, and that's something very interesting from IFA 2012, and that is the Android-powered Galaxy camera from Samsung. So the Galaxy camera is essentially like a Galaxy S3 plugged into a point-and-shoot camera. It has essentially a point-and-shoot body with a larger screen that is 4.8 inches. It has 720p resolution. It has 1.4 GHz dual-core quad-core processor, 8 GB of internal storage with a micro SD card slot, and a 16.3 megapixel CMOS sensor. It also has Wi-Fi 3G and 4G LTE, and runs Jelly Bean. So why would you have an Android-powered phone? That's something that you might just wonder, because essentially, or an Android-powered camera, because cameras right now, they're pretty good. You can just connect from a computer or any device and upload your photos, and you also have a phone where you can just take pictures and automatically upload them. But why would you have an Android-powered camera? And that is essentially because maybe you want to just have more features. Now, there are some flaws with having an Android camera. For example, most cameras start up almost instantly. Well, the Android devices will take up to like a minute to load up, which will be either meaning you'll have to either constantly have your camera running, or which will also mean you'll have to charge it constantly, or you'll have to wait every time you want to take a picture to boot up the camera. On the other hand, there's a lot of new features, like the huge Android application market, which will allow you to get various different applications, from photo editing to video editing applications, onto your device. And you can also install a bunch of photo sharing applications like Facebook or Instagram, which will allow you to upload some very, very high quality photos that you couldn't take with your Android device, Android phone, and put them on social networks, which will be kind of nice. So Android can essentially be tweaked and updated in order to make the best, most full-featured camera possible. And I honestly think this kind of feature, not on a point and shoot, but on something like a DSLR, could be very, very interesting, like a Canon T5i with Android. That would just be really a good idea, actually, because, you know, these point and shoot cameras, I personally don't think they're just a whole lot better than these Android cameras. They are a lot better, but they're not significantly better. Like the difference between like a phone camera and a DSLR. But having a DSLR running Android, you can take some really, really high quality photos. You can edit those huge photos, shrink them down so they can be uploaded to the internet very, very easily. And you can also do a bunch of basic editing. And the camera can be very easily updated. And I think that's a really great idea. Even though there's a huge market for smartphone cameras, there is still also a huge market for dedicated cameras. I think Samsung realizes that. You realize that some people want something better than something like a phone camera. Well, they still want all the features that Android has as an operating system. And they're just combining the two, making Android-powered camera. I'm really looking forward to this. It is kind of, in a way, a risk for Samsung, since it's not guaranteed to succeed. But I think there is going to be some success for this, since I think there is a market for a more smart camera, if you will, because, you know, there are smart TVs with more features. There are going to be smart cameras with more features. I think that's really what they're trying to do. A lot of these cameras have touch user interfaces that are kind of crappy. They don't work very well. But Android, on the other hand, is very smooth now. It works very well. And it could be a really great camera application or camera operating system. That's about it for this podcast. You can check us out at theprime.co. You can subscribe for more videos. You actually upload 2 videos a week. One on Saturday, which is this podcast, what you're watching now. And on Sundays, you upload another video, which is a Minecraft video, which you're doing right now. When more Minecraft series is up, we're doing other gameplay videos. If you have any games you want us to see us do, suggest them in the comments below. But again, check out our blog, theprime.co, and subscribe to this YouTube channel because we upload stuff constantly. That's about it.